Good morning. Hope everyone is doing well today. Thank you for coming on. And as always, I hope that you will pop into the chat room and say hello. And on the screen at this moment is a quilt by Maureen, I believe. And this is her finished handmade quilt. She had done it in her own colors, and it's beautiful. And I wanted you to be able to see it because it was the first quilt that picture of the completed quilt that I had received, and it's just absolutely lovely and great balance of color. When you look at it, the eye moves around the quilt very easily. There's nothing that, sticks out and draws your eye into that. It's quite pretty. So thank you for sending the picture. I appreciate that. And then I have a picture from a project we had done some time ago and entered it into, she entered it into a quilt show and received a ribbon on it. So that is very exciting. And I love the way and this, I'm trying to remember her name, but she named the quilt Harvey. That I do remember. So this is her Harvey. And the quilting on it, I think, is just divine. It really did this well. So what a great thing. So thank you for sending Harvey to me. And then I showed you how to make a Kiwandi quilt not long ago. And this is an example. Liz brought this and or sent it to me, excuse me. And she made it out of actual saris from India. And it's really quite lovely as well. What rich colors were used, and put it into a design, and then did some Kantha and Kiwandi stitching on it. So very lovely. Thank you very much for sending those pictures in. I appreciate that. And good morning, everyone. We've got Sherry, I'm not totally sure what you're asking, but YouTube, we're streaming it to that, but it's on Facebook Live. So if you go to Facebook to the Quilt Show with Alex Anderson and Ricky Timms, you will find this at 10 a.m. going live on Saturday mornings, at least 10 a.m. Pacific time. So. And yeah, aren't they beautiful quilts? All right. Good morning, everyone. Okay, today we're going to be working on my form of a freeform cutting quilts and looking at the possibilities with that. I know that I believe this past week or so there was a picture of from on the quilt show done that was a freeform cut, and I've seen them over and over again, and especially in the modern category or the contemporary category in the quilt shows. And so it gave me an idea that I've played around with it. I have not really taken a class on how to do it. I just went for it. So today, what I hope to accomplish with all of you is to show you a little bit and talk about sewing on a curve, and especially a very rounded curve on that, and very free form, so that it's not done with a Drunkard's Path ruler or anywhere or anything, but you make these circles using kind of the idea behind the Drunkard's Path, so that when you put four of them together, you get a little bit of a freeform wonky circle out of it. And so that's what today is about, showing you my version of that. There's plenty of versions, and I know people teach the classes for all kinds of reasons, and but if today inspires you a little bit to do a great job on it, hopefully you'll go back and watch some of the shows where people have come in and taught it, and so that you can kind of build your own repertoire of how you would like to do this. So let me drop you down to my table, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I Let me move these fabrics out of the way. All right. When this is a half of a circle with that. And so it's going to be a wonky circle because this didn't come out very circular, my center, when I cut it. I find that that's kind of my style. I don't quite get the rounded on there. I probably have to draw something in and freehand cut it. But this is how it happens for me. So that's half of a block, and then I've got the next block coming in. And so you're making this a quarter, and then when the other block gets in, I will have that wonky circle through the center. So, and this is basically a quarter of a block. And what I did to make it, quick and easy is these were fabrics that I had left over from a layer cake of Tula Pink fabrics that I had used for another demonstration. And so I had these and decided just to use them because why not use up some of the scraps and fabric that I already had on hand. And I think it's going to be very, very lovely. And I have it, enough of them that I could make a good lap size quilt out of this when I'm done. Because 4 pieces of fabric like this will give you 4 of these squares, and when you sew them together you'll have about a 16.5-inch unfinished block, so a 16-inch finished block. All right, so I went and found 4 more fabrics, and this time I want to use the background of the square all the same. And the reason, and so I chose this pink grunge, and I had it upside down. This pink grunge, I thought it looked good with the rest of my fabrics. So I am going to cut with this background, and then I want to show you how that if you want a solid background, that you can go ahead and make the first part of your Dresden plate, but then have the same background on all 4 corners. Whereas with mine, this first one, my 4 corners are, they're going to be different because I used 4 fabrics for each of those, and you're going to get this. But if I wanted all plain so that the circle is really what you're focusing on and kind of more of a bullseye effect, I'll show you how to do that too. So I have 4 fabrics that I chose that thought this would make a fun a small wall hanging, or to start with the demonstration, or if I really like it, I can go on and move to the next one. So as a layer cake, these are 10-inch squares. I want to do that so that you can say, oh, I've got these 10-inch squares, what am I going to do with them? I loved them. This is a possibility for you to do this. And for those of you who've already done this free form, hopefully you'll see something on here that we can that might help you in the process of you making these. So I have these 4 now lined up, and I want to show you that it takes a minute to get this all lined up, especially when I took them apart and categorize them into the squares that I wanted, the 4 that I wanted to work with. And so you can have, if you're going to make a full-size quilt of something like this, go ahead and pick, you can pick more than 4 colors, obviously, and or just stick with 4, and each block will certainly, you'll have blocks that will kind of, or that will repeat themselves as you do it. But what I found helpful in this process is that once I had, the blocks that I wanted and I had them straightened out, that if I added heat and ironed them together, that they stayed together as I was cutting them a little bit better. And of course, I could pin and do all of that, but I really didn't want to do that. So I added some heat to iron them, and now I'm going to do the cutting with that. And I want to move this so that each cut you can see, and I have to stand up because I can't do this without standing up. All right. So my first cut is going to be in this corner. I'm going to try to get it as close to a circle as I can for my own. So I'm going to turn it around just because I think it's going to help me a little bit better to get somewhat of a circle. And so I am just cutting, and don't put your finger in front. Make sure that, and this is going to be a little bit of and I should have put a new blade in. That is something that I'm going to tell you right now, that you're going to want a sharp blade. Obviously, you can see that right now in your rotary cutter so that it cuts well, okay? So I've got my first cut, and I'm only going to make 3 cuts on this because 10 inches isn't that big. And so now for my second cut, I'm just going to go for it, keeping my fingers behind the blade, and cut my second one. I've got that. And then my third cut, I think I'll make just a little bigger. And that's all, that's really up to you, how big you want it to be. All right. So now I have my 3 cuts, my 4 pieces of fabric, and so that I have my 4 corners. Let me make sure that you are seeing all right. I didn't see any questions there. So again, if you have questions or if you can be helpful to everyone else, that's great. So I'm going to choose to let this big piece be my top one. And then I'm going to go and find something that I want next to that. Or I want the pink to be that. And I think I'm going to let this one be my next one. All right. And then I think I need some polka dots. And of course, this is, you're going to have each piece within, and then what should we do here? Obviously, the last piece that I have. And so there's going to be my block for this first one. Now, I debated between a lime green out here and this pink. And because this was quite loud, I decided to go with the pink. But lime green is my favorite neutral. So then the process of sewing this together, because if you have made a drunkard's path, you know that this block is usually a little bit bigger than the next one because you need those four, that 1/4 inch seam line. And so this is going to come out wonky, and it's not going to be straight sewing. And you're going to have to let that organically happen so that it comes out. And when this is completely done, from a 10-inch layer cake, you're going to get an 8-inch square. That's, the best that I, was able to manage for that. So I'm going to take these first two and sew these together. I'm going to find the middle point. Now, you do not have to use pins to sew this together. It works just fine without the pins. I tend to put the pins in, and the reason that I put the pins in there is when I get under the machine, because it's wonky and it's not completely straight, I have a tendency to pull the fabric. And I don't want to pull the fabric because I'm not going to get as big a blocks out of it, and it's going to be the block will come out wonky. More wonky than it's supposed to. Let's put it that way. So I kind of overpin. So I just press the fabric down with no stretching, and I'm very careful about that with the pins. And so I kind of have a tendency to overpin, simply to keep under the machine. I can sew quicker, faster. When the sewing part comes, this takes a little bit because I just want to lay them down carefully and without any pull. So I'm just working at laying these on top of each other with no pull. And so when you do this as a free form cut, they do not match up. You have about a 1/4 inch or so left out on the edge. And I even find that one side I have more than that. I shouldn't necessarily, but I do have a little bit more on this side, as you'll see. But depends on how you sew. And depends on the cut too, because sometimes I have more on the side depending on my cut, and sometimes I have less. All right, so now I have, and just because I can, I'll get that first pin going in there. So now I have way too many pins, and you certainly don't need that many, but for here and quick sewing, I stuck that many pins in. So let's jump over to the sewing machine. And now I can simply put that right under, and I don't have to worry about, working on getting that just right, because my pins are really holding it in place. And it's kind of why I kind of overpin. I've done this with no pins at all, and I think it's your style. I just find that I don't stretch the fabric, and I get a little bit larger. And here is where this comes in handy to move this out of the way instead of my fat fingers, and keep it going round. And when I don't use any pins, I definitely rely on my orange stick to move that around, because it's very helpful. You can keep your fabric flat as you turn. Now I've got this piece, and I simply and again, I try very hard to lift my iron and not stretch that, that piece at all if I can help it. So now this is the piece that I have, those two sewn together, and now I'm going to lay this one around. And again, I want to find my center. And I don't measure or anything. I just flip it over. And now you get to watch me pin again. But again, I'm using my thumb here just to keep it flat so that I'm not pulling the fabric at all on this. I just want the fabric to lay down on its own, because if I pull it, I'm going to have a lot more fabric at the end, and my block is going to scrunch up if I do it differently. And again, if you have made this on your own, this type of quilt, and you have some suggestions or thoughts on it, please be sure to put it in the chat box, because I know we'll all want to gain from your experience as well. This is just my made up. I've not taken a class. I've not really watched any YouTube videos really on it, or anything like that. I, said, okay, I see how that's done, and it's free form. Let's go for it. And I hope that at times that you'll be brave like that and just go for it when you see something, and come up with your own style and your own version of what a block could or couldn't be. All right, so now that goes back under. I get my stick because I want, that to hang right there at the end, and I can control this out here and the underneath. And this is basically how I would sew a dress, a drunkard's path. I wouldn't have 3 cuts on a drunkard's path. I'd only have the 2. But it's basically sewn like that, and that's why we kind of called it Freeform Drunkard's Path, for lack of what else I would call this. And so my orange stick is really helpful for me to keep out the wrinkles, and I won't sew in any, little folds or anything like that. So I appreciate, this for that, or any type of stiletto. All right. All right. Again, I have this over the top, and so as you can see, I'm, these are not even at all. And then the last one goes in. Now here is where I want to talk about, this fitting into this curve. And you're sewing, it's not going to fit entirely. So if you want to have, a yardage of, a background fabric where you just want the circles and the bullseye, you would lay this on top of your fabric, just about 1/4 of an inch over, and then you would take your rotary cutter and cut that out of continuing yardage as you worked with each of the blocks. So when you have your quilt, let's just use the grid on here. If you have your 4 blocks here with the pink on the outside, your next 4 you would sew next to it, and you would have, that pink is going to come in between. So you're going to have a circle here, a circle here, a circle here, a circle here, with the pink all the way around if you did it this way. And, there's other ways that you can put your fabric in so that you get different looks with it, certainly. And you don't have to sew these together as a square. You can create, any of the designs that you would with a drunkard's path, where they curve back and forth. You can have all kinds of things and designs with it. It's just that they're going to be a little bit wonky and a little bit crazy on that. So we're going to do our last one so you can see a completed block, and then I'll show you the other one that I played around with my leftover layer cake. And I will tell you that I have been drooling over some of the layer cakes that the Quilt Show store has in. They are absolutely beautiful. So if you think you would like a layer cake, and give this a shot and see how many and what you can do with a layer cake and a quilt like this, that would be a lot of fun. And I think it would be a lovely quilt and a happy quilt to make for a college bed or a kid's room, or a blanket for at least here in California, for going to the beach, that kind of thing. It would just be a very fun quilt, I think. So some thoughts for you. But the other day, they had a layer cake on in the newsletter, and I just drooled over it. I would love to, but as most of us, we have enough fabric to last us for our lifetime and somebody else's. So I didn't need it. I wanted, but I didn't need it. But every once in a while you can't resist, because some of the new fabrics that are coming out are spectacular. All right, last sew, and we'll have our block. And thank you for showing up today. And some of you are probably cringing because I'm sewing over pins. And we're not supposed to do that. And I know that. And like right here, my needle was going to hit that pin, so I stopped and took it out. But on something like this, I kind of appreciate those pins, and I'm very much being very careful and watching where my needle is going to land. And so don't do as I say and not as I do. Is that, one of those? And so that was the only pin so far today that was going to hit my needle, because that dulls your needle. Well, there's two in this one. Goodness. It dulls the needle and puts burrs on them. And those burrs get in the center of our machine and they wreak havoc in there. So it's not a good idea to sew and hit those pins and dull our needles and do those chips. But I just realized I should probably say something about that, because it's real expensive to fix that. Very expensive. And so I learned the hard way not to sew over my pins, generally speaking. And I kept thinking, for that, what it cost me to fix my machine, how much fabric I could have bought. All right, so we've got our last piece there. And generally speaking, I don't like this much of this last piece showing, but for this, I really wanted to concentrate on and I wasn't really paying attention of exactly how big I was cutting my. And I will say, very much so, that on a block like this, that the Acorn precision piecing products, this one is the spray that you would put on this. No, that's the glue. Sorry about that. The Easy Press solution. This is the right bottle. But the Easy Press solution, if I put that on there as I iron, it relaxes the fabric, and my block is definitely flat, and I don't get any issues with it bubbling. Like right here, I've got a little bit of a bubble, and if I were to use, in fact, I've got my spray bottle here, and I'm just going to spray a little bit of the precision spray on there, and you don't need much. All right. And now I want to show you that I don't have any bubble anymore. And I love that stuff because it just relaxed the fabric and it's all set to go. And now I would trim this. I put to trim it, I make sure that this corner is set. So my ruler, when I put it on here to cut it into a block, let me grab my, and I have my 8-inch Quilter Select ruler, and I can put it right on there. I know it's straight, and now I simply can cut around that. And you know, I hope you just saw why this ruler is so fabulous, and I love it because I'm turning this completely around here in a very narrow area so that I can cut and trim that up. And it didn't move on me. And now I have my 8-inch block. All right. And I would make 4 more of those with, you know, the solid or mostly solid color out here. And now my center is very much a bullseye. So when you sew them together, again, you would have this one. I used 4 different fabrics and put them in, and so my edges are all different. Let me move that up a little bit. You won't see the whole thing. And I'm going to get my circle. All right, so let's go back, and I'm going to go up a ways here and see if there's lots of layer cakes in the store, and it's a total scrap buster. You got it. The curves do have so much bias, but that's why you just sew carefully, and that's why I'm very careful as I sew that ring on there. You know, Lynn, I'm sure that the leftover on the edge changes on the angle, and you know, yeah, I'm sure that's probably why. I used fabric glue. I kept getting stabbed by the pins. You know, Janet, that's even smarter than my pins. Everything looks so easy when you do it. You know, thank you. But mostly what I try to show you is pretty easy to do. And I think we just have to let go. And I learned that later on. And yes, I did sew over the pins, Cheryl, but I hope you heard my explanation of that. What is the piece that looks like a cutting mat? Oh, that is the Sew Steady um, mat. And I will ask Kristen if she will put that up, a link for you. Check out Jane LaFazio. Inspirations on how to add embroidery stitches. Oh, absolutely. Jane is one of my favorite art quilt piecing person, and I love it. And Nancy Z has her own method of this. How do I keep from hitting those pins? I watch really carefully and I take them out if I don't see them. Lynn, you certainly could do it either way. Recutting the outside fabric, but it's just for me, I just use it right in there with my 4 and I only cut once. But to get the same fabric on all the corners, I just lay it over and cut it a little bit easy, as to save fabric. Okay. Are my needles extra fine in size? Absolutely. I use the finest needles that there are. I use both Clover extra fine needles and I use the Quilter Select extra fine. And if you were to look at my needle in my, let me get down here with my hand. This one's bent, but a little bit. But the difference in these, the white and blue that I used to use and the other one, there's a big difference in that. And so use the finest needle that you can. Um, okay, yeah. Kristen has put up links, and it just does take practice with the circles. All right. And so here is, you know, one version of that, and my piece fell down. So where your corners are all different, depending on the fabrics that you pick, you're going to have that circle in the center, and it's very visible. Or you can do it with having the outside, a solid color, and then your circles or bullseyes are really going to pop for you on that side of it. So anyway, that is the lesson for today. Hopefully it was helpful to you and you learned a little bit of something in terms of free form, and to go for it and be brave. And you can work on coming up with your own style, your own methods that work for you, that you get a result that you love. And that's really what this quilting is about. I know my mother, when I was small, really didn't have many patterns. She would sometimes be able to get a pattern from the Kansas City Star, because I grew up near Kansas City, and we would use patterns and things, but most of the time made up her own patterns, and we did a lot of applique. I had a brother who could draw well, and he drew, and so we took his pictures and recreated it onto fabric and things like that. So be brave, go for it, find ways to enjoy that process and do that. Somebody asked on here about my sweater. Living in this little town of Sonora in California, the downtown area is quite charming and cute. It was the gold country and one of the towns where the gold rush took place. And there's some antique stores, some upcycle stores, and little shops and boutiques. So I bought this in an antique store. It's a new sweater, but they have a little corner where they have clothing and stuff within that, which is kind of funny and charming in its own way. And I saw it and I liked it too. So I'll answer that question. So I don't know where you would buy one similar, but I'm sure you can find something. Thank you so much for being a part of my morning and letting me be a part of yours. And I will see you next week with another possibility of all of this. Hopefully, we'll be doing the rulers, and there's a chance that some of you might win a free. I think we're giving away 2 sets of rulers of the new 60-degree angle and the 3-in-1 ruler. So tune in next week and you might be a winner if that's what's going to happen. But the advertisement for what we're doing will be on the Quilt Show newsletter. See you next week. Bye.